returns for anybody interested in investing in those places. Now, with 16% of the world's population, over 1 billion people, a large land mass endowed with natural resources, and improving, albeit slowly, changing governance and openness, the low base of economic activity suggests that high growth rates can be sustained for a long time. At the moment, countries such as China and India have realized this and are heavily investing in many parts of the continent. We in the US need to take a cue from these countries and begin to follow suit. Otherwise, by the time we realize that the first mover advantage would have gone to the countries, and what we'll be left with will be the crumbs at the bottom of the table. According to KPMG, 3 main categories of opportunity exist for potential investors in Africa: infrastructure, resources, and consumer demand. Personal banking services, small and medium-sized businesses, financing, microfinance, development finance, and opportunities for trade finance houses. I was talking to a friend yesterday and lamenting the fact that in some places in Ghana, 1 piece of land can be sold to 3 or 4 different people, and legitimately. And the absence of title insurance results in cases clogging the courthouses for years and years and years, all of which tend to slow development. And the one unfortunate result of this is that banks very rarely want to give mortgage loans because they're not sure if the title is clean or not. And at this point, I'm not even sure there's any company insuring titles in Ghana. So there are several opportunities. The food and drink sector needs to expand to keep up with the rapid rate of urbanization. Lagos, for example, is probably now one of the biggest cities in the world. And so all of this rapid urbanization means that we need to feed the people, and we cannot feed them in the traditional way. We need to package them properly so that they are healthy and brought to them where they are. So formal retail penetration is among the lowest in the world throughout most of Africa. In recent times, I've seen a few supermarkets spring up in some of the cities, but there's still quite a long way to go. Now, these call for investors, and we in the US have plenty of investors. We need to educate the people with the funds about the potential that is in Africa so that we take advantage of it. Thank you.
Wow. You're keeping us on schedule.
Yep. Let me get, no, I'm trying to get it off so that you don't.
Okay. We are going to now move right into the next session, and I would like to welcome to the table here for our overview of the cross-cultural issues of how to sensitize people on both sides of what we call the puzzle between us to what people need to be aware of when they are going to do business with people who come from very different traditions. So I'd like to welcome to the table Robert Taylor, whom I saw earlier today. Yes, Robert Taylor, the Vice President of Global Business Development, IHRDC. He flies back and forth between here and Africa all the time, has an office in Lagos, and is all over the place. It's a delight to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Joyce Ashland Tantong, who is a colleague of mine, did Joyce make it yet? She had an issue with dropping off her son. Please take your seat, sir. Dropping off her son to school, and I was hoping to transport her, but it didn't work out. So I hope that she will arrive and join us in progress. And Jackie Torsellini, I saw earlier, who is an international trade specialist here with the small business development in Connecticut. So if you can get us started here, hopefully Joyce will join us in progress. Thank you very much, both. and I have been particularly looking forward to this session. I actually introduced a course at the University of Hartford a number of years ago in doing business across cultural boundaries. I have no business background, so I had no business doing that course. But it was populated by a lot of people from the business school who wanted to learn how to do this, and I think this is terribly important stuff. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Do you want to start?
Well, thank you very much. I'll second the comments about Emmanuel. I met Emmanuel flying between Abuja and Lagos, and we sat next to each other, and it was the fastest flight of my life because we talked the entire time. It's only a 45-minute flight, but nevertheless, when we were finished, he asked me if I would come here sometime in the future. I wasn't quite sure what the dates were, but around July, he sent me an invitation, and I was thrilled to get it. And for that, I thank Emmanuel very much. I don't know if you want a quick biography, but here's my story. I'm a mechanical engineer. I graduated from the University of Kentucky in 1971. I joined Halliburton Corporation in 1973. I worked 25 years internationally as a drilling and completion engineer, and lived in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Indonesia, Norway, Oman, there's a couple others in there. I had my wife and children with me. And then in 1999, I retired from Halliburton and I went to work in Boston, Massachusetts for International Human Resource Development Corporation. And of course, that's not a technical drilling or mechanical engineering company, so I went to Suffolk University in Boston and received a master's degree in adult and organizational learning. And primarily what we do as an organization is we're 45 years old, we're a private company, we're particularly strong in Africa, and we build business simulation models around the oil and gas industry, and we teach to the models emerging executives and managers from national oil companies, private industry, on how to make decisions based around the information that we build into the simulator. And the simulators are geographically sensitive, so we can teach to Africa, we can teach to Asia, to Latin America, or whatever it might be. Having said that, I'm primarily in the energy business, so the main countries that I'm working with in Africa would be Ghana. I was involved in the discovery of the Jubilee field with Total Energy, and which is a big driver in the Ghanaian economy right now. Nigeria, of course, we have an office in Nigeria. Nigeria is a very powerful player in the international energy industry. Angola is another one. I just returned from Angola. And then the emerging East African countries, Mozambique, the Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, with the discoveries in Lake Albert. So that's the sector that I work in. I do get a lot of people also from the tax authorities who don't have energy backgrounds. I get people from the Revenue Authority, people from ministries of finance, and even as I speak today, we have around 35 Africans in Boston going through our International Petroleum Management Certificate Program. I did leave with Michelle. Michelle, it is Michelle, right?
Yes.
Some information about our company if anybody wanted the specific information rather than distribute it all around, so you could just ask her. Other than that, you can find me on the internet at www.ihdc.com, and I have business cards, and thank you for having me this morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jackie Torsolini. I work for the Connecticut Small Business Development Center as an international trade specialist. And I'm excited to be here because I think that there are a lot of opportunities in Africa. What I do for the Small Business Development Center, for those of you who are not aware, it is an organization that was created by congressional legislation back in the 1980s. And there are SBDCs all over the United States. We're funded through the Small Business Administration and in Connecticut through the Department of Economic and Community Development, and we're hosted by the University of Connecticut. So I always like to tell people that we are their tax dollars at work. We provide no-cost business advising because of that funding. And we work one-on-one with companies. My area of specialty is to help companies get involved in exporting. I think for a lot of companies, it can be very intimidating trying to understand the rules and regulations of how to get their product or service out of the country, and then even more confusing, how do they get their product or service into another country without finding themselves in any type of trouble. So I work with them to help with those types of issues. I'm co-located, very fortunately, with the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is the federal arm of exporting, and they as well provide no-cost advising to companies. The U.S. Department of Commerce also has field offices in over 100 countries overseas. So I work with companies here to help them access and understand Department of Commerce services. My background is I had worked in the insurance field for many years, had run my own company in general contracting, and decided I wasn't really following my passion, and my passion has always been other cultures. So I went back to school and I received my master's degree in political science, international relations from Southern Connecticut State University. And it was through my program there that I obtained an internship at the U.S. Department of Commerce. So I started with that, and then I expanded into this role, and I've been working to help and train companies on how to export for almost 5 years now.
Delighted you were able to join us, Joyce. I am particularly excited to introduce Joyce, a colleague whom I have met recently, cheering for soccer at the University of Hartford and at international matches. We have an equal passion, and she has, I think, 2 sons now who are playing as well. Joyce is from Cameroon, and she is a vibrant presence on the campus of the University of Hartford. She sings, dances, recites poetry, gets her students excited. I've been at performances where she has had them present, and it's just very exciting stuff. The reason this panel exists is because Joyce raised a question at a board meeting recently when she was able to visit with us about the need for greater understanding about what the issues are when you are going to cross these boundaries. I think that the expertise that we have assembled at this table is awesome. Joyce, please take it away after that brief introduction.
Well, as Harold said, I am from Cameroon, and I grew up in Cameroon, studied in Cameroon, got my first degree in Cameroon. I graduated from the University of Yaoundé in 1989. Now, don't start trying to guess my age. And from there, I traveled to Wales in the United Kingdom, and where I got a master's degree in library and information science, went back to Cameroon, and relocated to the United States in 1994. I am now, as Harold says, an associate professor at the University of Hartford. So I have been living out of Cameroon since 1989, but I've been in and out. And I serve as a consultant for a number of African diaspora organizations here. And as someone who can give a context for the continent, especially Cameroon. And to do business, you must understand the context. And I would like to start with this flyer that showed up at the University of Hartford last week. It's flyers for study abroad program. And this program, we have it in Brazil and Africa. So this is if you can see from there, this is the flyer for Brazil. Travel to Brazil and do good. That's to Brazil. Help Africa. I think that sets the framework for what this panel is about. So what is the context here? You're traveling to Brazil and do good, which means you're going to help, right? But it is not framed as help. And this is help Africa, not one country, the whole continent. And there's nothing here to say what countries this trip is going to. So the person going to Brazil, the person who signs up to go to Africa, what are they signing up to do? To go help, to go give. That place doesn't have something to give back. You're going to go help them out. That premise itself already starts on a very faulty note. And that is something that if you're going to do business in Africa, you have to go as from a framework of partnership. Okay? You're going to partner with someone there, with a business there, for a purpose. You're not going as a savior to go rescue. That is not to say that there are not things happening there that that you need maybe to help, maybe to do good, the way it's framed here. So there are a few things that I would want to talk about. The first thing, of course, is to start that Africa is not a country. And so we are talking about 53 countries here, or 54, depending on how you're counting it. And that already poses a big challenge. So where is it that you want to do business? Which of these countries? So it's not just the continent, it's the particular location. And if I take Cameroon as an example, and Cameroon may be a good example because Cameroon, I think, may be the only country in Africa that was colonized by 3 nations. First Germany, and then French, English. So Cameroon gives us a gateway to French Africa and English-speaking Africa as well. So taking Cameroon as an example, just in Cameroon alone, you have over 235 languages. And each of those languages, you have a culture embedded in those languages. So that already poses a challenge. And my friend here on the panel will tell you that she tried to put something together, just for like the 7 African countries represented in this conference, a little cultural guide, and she found out that
It was too great a task.
because each country is culture specific. But I think there are general things that one can use as a guide. And the first thing would be gender. And again, it depends on where you're going to. If you're coming to Cameroon and you are in the southern part of the country, which is predominantly Christian, and you come, let's say you go to Yaoundé or Douala, the 2 major cities that you may be doing business in, chances are if you're a woman going in there, you will be treated respectfully based on what you're bringing in. If you're going to the northern part of the country, which is predominantly Muslim, maybe certain expectations would be upfront in the way you present yourself. Also, age is revered. So if you're coming in and you're very young,
Does somebody own that phone?
Is it, I wonder if it's my alarm in my iPad. Where is it?
Time to wake up.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call.
Shall I look? Because nobody seems to be claiming it. Oh, there they go. I usually get up earlier than this.
Sorry, Joyce.
so there are a number of things. Age also could be an issue. The universities are turning them out younger and younger. So you could come very accomplished, and you come in to deal with somebody who is much older. your knowledge base could be doubted because you're not. We grew up in a culture where gray hair meant knowledge, wisdom. These days you have wisdom in very dark hair. So you have things like that. But I want to say that things are changing. There are many issues that most people will be worried about. What of communication? Is there internet in that part of the world? Do they have cell phones? If I send a message today, would it get there? For those of us who deal with this every day, you think that is a very stupid question. But for people who get Africa framed in this kind of terms, those are very important questions. But things are changing in that, yes, communication may not be continuous because of power outages here and there, but it is there. Political instability. There's political instability in places, but you have to know where you are going to. It's not everywhere. I remember when Boko Haram, when the news of Boko Haram was making waves in on the media, I was trying to go to Cameroon, and my dean was not very happy with me. It's like, I don't think you should go. I'm like, it's so far away from where I am. So you have to understand where is it you're going. Most people frame Africa as a hotbed. Yes, we're not denying that there are things happening, but it's in different places. So Boko Haram is in parts of Nigeria, but business is going on in Nigeria. It's going on in Lagos, it's going on in Abuja, it's going on in different places. So know exactly where you're going. I just came back from the UK, and as soon as they took my passport, I think saw that I was born in Cameroon. It's an American passport. The next thing was, have you been to West Africa? I said, why? Oh, we're asking because of Ebola. I'm like, Cameroon never had an Ebola incident. Okay? But the continent, that region has been framed. Even Nigeria that had it, it was cleared. It was contained. In fact, I think Nigeria showed how to contain that disease. But no, it's still framed that way. So all this, again, boils down to understanding the context, really studying it. The big elephant in the room when it comes to doing business in Africa is corruption, bribery. How can you go about doing business there without dealing with that monster? Does it exist? Yes, it does. But good news is that there's so much being done these days to contain it. In the French region, you have the organization CONAC. That's in its French acronym. In Nigeria, I think is the EFCC. These are organizations that have been created just to deal with corruption, especially where businesses are concerned. And I don't know whether it was mentioned before. There are laws that have just been enacted in the USA and UK for companies that do business with foreign companies. If you give bribe, there are sanctions. The case of Siemens is a point something that came up very recently. So there are processes to deal with this. So it's not like chaos. It's not chaotic. So the climate is right. It's right to do business in different parts of Africa. There are laws in place to deal with this, and many companies are doing business and thriving. And so when I heard about this organization that is trying to link small businesses in Connecticut to African countries, I thought, as an African who is living out here and knows a little bit of what is going on there, I should come in person to say that the time is ripe. The doors are open, and you can thrive. We can get a good partnership from here. Thank you.
Well, what I wanted to mention is I thought, as I was trying to put together my comprehensive business etiquette guide for the African countries, I started to see themes that ran across through multiple countries. And, I think what's very important is for American companies in business, we tend to have a philosophy that it's all about the money. And for many people, it is all about the money. But there are a growing number of companies, and I think everybody can know that within the business community, businesses have concerns, and they want to make sure that they're inclusive and that they're looking at all opportunities that they can. And when it comes to working and negotiating with different companies and within different countries in Africa, what I thought was interesting is that there needs to be a personal relationship. And I always think about this because typically when I send emails to whether it's colleagues or clients that I'm working with, I always start it off with, "Hi, how are you?" Because I always want to know how somebody's doing and how things are going. And I think that's something very similar to what I found within the African culture, is there's a personal relationship that you want to build first before you move on to the business aspects. And so, working with companies and working with them on how to really look at countries within Africa, those are some of the things that we help guide them through. We help them find, okay, what are the different cultures like? What are the appropriate connections that you need to make? And to touch upon what you were saying, Joyce, all the countries that are represented here today are members of the World Trade Organization. And the World Trade Organization is in the process of, they've developed a trade facilitation agreement, and they're waiting, they need 2/3 majority of WTO members before it can be passed. But basically what this trade facilitation agreement does is it sets standards so that it can help reduce corruption, not just in Africa, all over the world, and that includes the United States. The United States is not a perfect country. I think, we have corruption just the way any other country does. One of the differences are that we do really try to either come up with ways to eliminate it, and once it's found, we try to find ways to prosecute and hold people accountable. And I think this trade facilitation agreement is looking to try and have countries have similar ways of processing goods when they come through customs, showing that there's more transparency, computerization, because once you have computerization, it's a lot more difficult for corruption to occur. So I think there are strides moving forward, and I guess I would implore any representatives here from the African countries that look at that trade facilitation agreement, find ways that you would be interested in passing that so that we can get this passed through the WTO and really start to move forward, because that's going to give people and companies here in the United States a greater comfort level with doing business in Africa.
Thank you, very interesting. And let me just say a few things about, since this is a cultural, I guess, forum panel here, in my mind, I've got Africa in three zones in my mind, not forgetting that Libya is in Africa, and Egypt is in Africa, and Tunisia is in Africa, and Morocco and Algeria is in Africa. But for me, it's the French, the Portuguese, and the English. And so I only recently learned that actually English is quite prevalent in Cameroon. There's an English sector and a French sector. I have a great story about traveling between Yaoundé and Douala, and it so happened I did that to catch an airplane, and I was on the road in a taxi, and in front of us was the Tour de Cameroon, which is a bicycle race, very famous bicycle race, thousands of bicyclists, and they wouldn't get out of the way. And so for 4 hours, we followed the Tour de Cameroon. Of course, I missed my plane. But I did participate in the Tour de Cameroon via taxi. Great place, Cameroon. So I've got those 3 blocks, language blocks. But let me tell you where we're investing our money in Africa. It's in the youth. The big thing that's going on in Africa right now is a real shortage of basic skills. And this would be in what we would generally call the mechanical, electrical, process, and instrumentation areas. These are not the university levels, these are not the engineering and so forth. Because for every geologist, you need 20 people working in the field, and so forth and so on. And what's happening in Africa now is an explosion in vocational training. All of these projects, energy projects that have to go down, I'm primarily in the energy, but it doesn't matter if it's construction or it doesn't matter if it's manufacturing. People who are running the plants, running the basic infrastructures, need these 4 areas. We call them operations and maintenance. And so wherever I go in Africa, that's really where we're focused right now. And the problem is really resource and funding. Most of these vocational technical institutes are government. And they don't have the resources to buy what is necessary to set up a very sophisticated training lab, for example. Might cost hundreds, if not millions of dollars to set up training labs and so forth and so on. So this is a real struggle for us, and the other struggle would be language, because at this level, it's the national language is going to dominate if you're not a university type, if you're a vocational high school level. So what we're putting a lot of resources in right now is translations of our training materials into French, into Portuguese, and finding qualified instructors that can do that. And it's a cultural issue because we have to be sensitive to how the English translates to the French, translates to the Portuguese, that the people understand what it is. And this is all, what we focus on are the competencies required to do the jobs, the basic jobs. That's what our company does. We identify all the skills and tasks necessary to perform even the most remedial functions, but that has to be translated correctly. It has to be demonstrated, and then in the laboratory where we're teaching, we have to be able to demonstrate that culturally correctly for that particular country. So we're working all over Africa. I know it's a big place. I've been to it.